I would expect the labor market to get tighter. I would expect it to be increased competition for frontline workers, and I would expect wages to go up.
This is the PMP Industry Insider Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we take a look at what is changing in the lawn and pest industries, and we take you to the front lines of those that are driving those changes. As always, I'm Donnie Shelton, co-host of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, and owner. I'm just going through. I don't know why I feel like I need to. I don't know, promote myself here. No, I don't know. Owner of Triangle, my favorite company, by the way. We have Triangle Pest as well as Triangle Lawn. And with me is my other co-host, should I say partner, Mr. Dan Gordon. Dan.
Well, now that you've taken up a few minutes and wasted my time with that, so it's Dan Gordon from PCO Bookkeepers.
Hey, if you're on YouTube, Dan is red right now because I called him a partner. So keep going. Yes.
No. That's just all my scratches from my dog, the vicious dog that bit me. So anyway, let's see. Before we dive into the episode, which we haven't defined yet. And the episode is actually, this is an important one. It's the 2024 election, what it means for pest and lawn business owners. And I think we have a lot of really good information. But let's thank our sponsors, Coalmarch by WorkWave, offering marketing services specifically designed for pest and lawn care companies. Whether you're looking to grow or prepare your business for sale, Coalmarch can get you there. Wow, that was added there.
Wow.
And then Pest providing insurance products tailor-made for the pest and lawn industries. Pest understands the risks of business and offers coverage that meets your needs. And if you are interested in joining a PMP Industry Insider peer group, and we've got, there's several dozen people who are in the peer groups now, please visit PMP Industry Insider /peer groups, or go back and listen to episode 136 for more information with our facilitator, David Billingsley, who is doing a terrific job. And I think that's all of the administrative nonsense that we need to go through.
Well, I do want to add one thing. I've been talking to a couple of folks who've actually joined our newest group, and sounds like things are going pretty well there. So if you're on the fence, certainly would encourage you to. Again, it doesn't have to be one of our peer groups, but I will tell you, a lot of folks I've been talking to, it's really a game changer for them in terms of accountability and getting ideas and really getting their business to the next level. And so if it's something you
by the way, have the conversation. You don't have to join if you don't like what you
right.
Join.
Exactly.
But it is it's pretty exciting because we kind of started it from nothing, and now we've got several groups going, and it's pretty good stuff. So,
well, we're going to be talking about my favorite topic. I mean, one that I just love talking about. You want to introduce our topic, Dan, and also
so your candidate lost, and so we'll talk about.
And I'm a sore loser. Let me just tell you,
sore loser.
I'm such a sore loser.
And see, if you notice, if you're watching this on YouTube, Donnie's wearing a blue sweater, so he's.
Oh, that's true. I am wearing a blue sweater.
So,
it's because I don't own a red one. I need to. But yeah.
So anyway, so let's start. Obviously the election, maybe it surprised some people, maybe it didn't surprise others, but anyway, here we are with a Republican president-elect. And the two houses of Congress also go under Republican ways. So it would seem to me that a lot can get done if our government could get out of their own way.
I think you just said an oxymoron. Anything getting done in government like that just doesn't go together. But yes, yeah.
But we haven't had this situation in a while. So let's start with the big picture. Why should pest control and lawn care company owners?
Well, hang on. Before you get into this, there's a few things I want to chat about because I actually, believe it or not, I was not surprised by the election. I was not surprised by the result. And here's why. Do you remember back when Trump ran the first time and everyone was like, oh yeah, no one's voting for Trump. Trump's terrible. No one's voting for him, yada, yada, yada. And then he came away with the win. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I'm not surprised about Trump winning. What I am surprised about is both houses of Congress.
Absolutely.
That was going to
100%.
be.
Well, I guess my point is like, and listen, this is not, I'm not going to get on here and him and Hall, but it is interesting. I think whenever you look at these polls, like, have you seen kind of the fallout from this? It's like, now they're like, well, the reason the polls are wrong is because Democrats are more likely to answer polls than Republicans. they
No,
cover, so my point here is that what was surprising to me was how disconnected the forecasting was from the reality of what really went down with the election. And is that a function of people just don't want to admit that they're going to vote for Trump? Is that a function of, who knows? I mean, maybe it could
but
be the
if you
organ.
think about it, so everybody's calling it a mandate, and that's fine. But it's just a few points. So I could see where the polls, have a statistical error rate. And I think, I don't know whether you were within, whatever standard deviations, but it wasn't that big. But it's big for the Republicans because, they got the popular vote. They got the,
Yeah, I got to disagree on that one.
yeah.
He won every swing state.
Hmm.
He won every swing state, and he won the popular vote.
Hmm. But
That he
look at the
didn't do that the
percentages.
first. Yeah, he didn't
But
do,
it's
and
not
I
like 10 points. It's
no,
just,
it's not 10
just a
points,
couple of,
100%. But it's just the fact that there was that much of, like it wasn't even like it was no battleground state was won. Like, I don't know. Listen, again, I'm not a political guy and I hate
Oh,
politics.
it's interesting. Oh, I was watching the news yesterday, and they were talking about all the different electoral college. The amount of votes each candidate got for the last several elections, and I think after this one he's like 313 or something, which Reagan against Carter was over 500. That was the biggest route ever, right? So I saw
Oh
that too. That
gosh.
was pretty good.
I
So
don't know. Who
yeah,
knows, right? It's
yeah,
again. I mean, one. I guess if there's a silver lining in any of this, which is silver lining in any kind of political landscape, I think is funny too. But no one's calling it rigged now. I guess it's all that conversation's over. Um, so
you don't
anyway,
even want to get me started about that.
I'm
You know,
just pushing the buttons, man. It's all
it
good.
would have been rigged if it went the other way. But anyway, so let's talk about why it's important. And
Yes,
listen, it is what it is. So no matter how you voted, you got to get on the train and hope for the best for the country because there's a lot going
100%.
on. So let's get started with the big picture. So why
Yeah.
should we care about it? What's at stake for small and mid-sized businesses in this election cycle? And we'll talk about a bunch of key areas. But why do what unique concerns do you have when it
Yeah.
to,
Well, listen, I actually think, when it comes to politics, I don't bet on the horse so much as I do the team. And what I mean by that is, I think people put way too much emphasis on the president and not enough emphasis on the administration. Given that, I mean, legitimately, Trump is coming in with almost a golden setup. He's got the House, he's got the Senate backing him. Of course, he's just off of the election with a big win. you know, I think for our industry, it's going to be positive. And the reason I think that is because if you look at Trump's kind of his history, I mean, take out the fact of his mouth and that kind of other stuff, and I'm not going to get into all of that. But
Right.
the fact is, in his first term, he signed the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017, where he lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. I think that's going to increase cash flow for a lot of businesses. It's certainly going to be one of those things where
Let's hold that discussion because I have
I'm
a
not. I'm just telling you,
whole,
like, what do I think it means, right?
yeah,
What do I
yeah,
think it means for owners?
yeah.
Is the first thing is that I think it's going to be positive in terms of cash in your pocket. I also think it's going to be positive in terms of regulation.
Yeah, that's where I,
Remember, like, when he was in the first time, what he did with the EPA, and he basically didn't fund them for the most part. I mean, he did a lot of different, and he did the same with the IRS. I mean, he kind of cut their budget as well. And so I think overall, it's going to have a big impact on our industry, both from a financial perspective as well as from a regulatory perspective. And obviously, we're going to get into all of that as we get into the details of this podcast. But ultimately, the negatives. There's all kinds of negatives that can happen. I mean, listen, this has been one wild election cycle. There have been so many times I thought Trump was done, like over, dead, and it was like he was getting killed by Biden, and they had that big debate. And then I thought, oh gosh, he's going to win the election. And then Kamala got on, and then I'm like, oh gosh, he's going to lose the election. And then sure enough, he comes away with the win, and kind of a big win. And so, there's other things that we don't, that doesn't come through the administration, where like if we get into another war or something else, I mean that could be problematic, but and who knows when that comes? I mean, because it's a wild time. But as far as like for us, I think it's going to be a positive, financially.
Yeah, I mean, less regulations and potentially lower taxes.
Right.
I mean, that's what else could you want as a business person,
Right.
But some of the things that I wanted to go over, which is up my ballywick, I just actually wrote an article, and if you subscribe to the PCO Bookkeepers newsletter, you'll get this, and it probably will be published in PMP. But I kind of went over the, what are the tax changes that are likely to happen? And you had mentioned the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. And the way that was designed is it wasn't like normal legislation where you say, okay, this is going to happen. What they did is they said, this is going to happen and it's going to expire. And the expiration date is at the end of 2025. And there's a whole bunch of provisions that are expiring at the end of 2025, which I believe most of which will ultimately become permanent and will not expire. But some of the maximum tax brackets. So the way you're taxed in the U.S. is it's bracketed. So the more money you make, the higher percentage that you pay. And prior to the 2017 Act, the maximum federal rate was 39.6%, and now it's 37%. And then all throughout the brackets, it's lower. And I believe that that's going to become permanent. I don't know what the effect that has on.
Well, hang on, because I think you're right, and the reason is, and I hope I'm not confusing things here, but I believe the reason they had timelines on was because that's what they needed it to get it all the way passed. Now that he controls both houses, it may be like that's what it is, and you like it or love it, leave it. It doesn't matter. We're passing it anyway. So
So I'm not exactly sure why, but it certainly seemed like a good A/B test. Right. When you start to give, when you start to reform the tax code such that taxes are lower, that's steroids for the economy. Right.
Right.
And you can make an argument that at some point you'll crash just like you would with steroids, but we haven't found that time yet. And we're talking about 2.5% here. Right.
Uh-huh.
Why are you laughing?
I just don't know where you're coming up with this metaphor of steroids and crashing, but let's keep going. So it's fine.
No, it definitely is to the economy, right? So just like
there's also roid rage. Does that fit in there anywhere, or is it no?
That was the election. So that said, just like you could say that the Fed lowering interest rates to 0% during COVID. That was also a steroid, right? And
yes.
So then you see what happens when you stop feeding it steroids. I'm not saying that lowering taxes is a bad thing, but listen, I live in Florida. There's a reason. So, right?
I get it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, but hang on though, but basic economics as well. I mean, one of the reasons that inflation took off was because we pumped so much money into the economy.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's not like it's just a one-sided equation. Like we have to be balanced. And by the way, I love tax cuts. I'm certainly not arguing against them at all. I'm just making the point, like we can't be willy-nilly either, because if you do that, then we're going to be like some of these foreign countries where you're paying $1 million for a candy bar, right? I mean, it just
Well,
doesn't really work.
you got to figure out, okay, if I'm going to cut taxes, that means it's less government to the revenue or less revenue to the government. So what programs will you
Cut,
either cut or, get rid of,
borrow.
whatever, or borrow? So that's, so I mean, it's like going out on your credit card. You can go out a little or you can go out a lot, but you got
Right.
to figure that out. But another one that was, so the reduction in the tax brackets, that's one that affects everybody. But here's one that is kind of interesting. So there's something called the standard deduction that you automatically get, and it used to be, your itemized deductions. Well, it still is. If your itemized deductions exceed the standard deduction, then you get to itemize. But if they don't, then you take the standard deduction. Well, it used to be because of, state and local taxes and a few other things, almost everybody would itemize. But what this did was this actually for lower to middle income people made it so that you don't have to itemize because you get this standard deduction and it's pretty large.
Mhm.
And I don't think that that's going to change. I think that that's going to become permanent. It makes for simpler filing, less record keeping. So that's most likely that's going to become permanent.
Well, and I don't want to shift gears too much here, but I do want to talk about there's another really big key part of this candidacy, presidency, administration, whatever you want to call it. And we've talked about this so many times on the podcast, and I want to make sure we give some time to it, which is I think once Trump takes office, this freaking farm bill may actually get passed. And if it does, that is a huge win for our industry, not
Hmm.
only for pest, but also for lawn. And do you want to explain why that is, Dan? I mean, I'm happy to talk about it, but I mean, what's in that farm bill that's the golden
Well, that preemption is
that preemption? Yes,
so yes.
100%.
But
I
you
mean,
are jumping around because I was on the tax thing. But go ahead.
I know. But I just
No,
so
but that's huge.
it's massive. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
massive because if the farm bill goes, I mean, you think about these companies right now that are dealing with municipalities and are, they're getting and I mean, you think about how much money is wasted on trying to, try to stay and comply with these regulatory things that are happening at a town level, at a city level, even at a state level. Like it's huge that this is going to happen. And I think there could not have been a better outcome for this to get through. If it is ever going to happen, it absolutely is going to happen. I would say next year. There may be some
I
more.
mean, my take on the preemption is that people in Washington just don't really care about the service industry or how it
No.
affects is not that big of a deal because you know what? If you're not in a truck rolling from town to town or county to county, you
Hmm.
comply with the local ordinance. It's not
Right.
a big deal. But
Right.
if you have a truck that's rolling into three different counties during the day or, five different towns that all have different rules, it gets really, really onerous. So,
So it's huge on taxes, and you want to get it back into deductions. It'll
yeah,
be
let's get
good.
back.
Good.
So,
But I
what?
just got to say, so regulatory side, financial side, taxes. What else on tax that
So
you feel like?
there's a lot on tax. So, this is not a business one, but it affects, most people, and that's the increased child tax credit, which was, that has bipartisan support, so that's going to be made permanent. But here's the one that's really, really interesting. You know this thing called the pass-through entity tax that came
Mhm.
out. So what happened was during the 17 Act, what it did is it limited your ability to deduct state and local taxes. That's the real estate taxes on your house, the taxes that you pay to your state, and or if you have local taxes, it was capped at $10,000. So what a lot of states, most states, red and blue, they created for business owners the ability to deduct those taxes at the entity level called a pass-through entity tax. Okay. Well, it seems to me that this $10,000 cap will either increase significantly or they'll remove the cap because there was no cap on it prior.
Right.
And I think that that was one of the things that, in order, the problem was coming up with the bill in 2017, you had to say, okay, well, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut this, but where where are we going to, if we cut too much, then the government, the deficit will be, or the debt will be just way too much. So they capped this at $10,000. If you remember, certain states were thinking to make their state taxes charitable deductions. I mean, there was all kinds of things. And then they settled on this pass-through entity tax, which may become irrelevant. It'll be interesting. But so those are on the individual side, but the business side, we reduced the corporate tax, as you said, from 35% to 21%. But here's the deal. Most small businesses are not C corporations, so it doesn't matter. Nobody really got the benefit of that. But what they did get the benefit of is this thing called a 199A deduction, where you're allowed to take 20% of your pass-through income, because most small businesses are pass-throughs. They're either S corps or LLCs that tax like an S corp or whatnot. And so that 199A deduction, if you're going to keep the tax rates at 21% at corporate, and in fact, Trump actually said that he wants to lower them, then it's a no-brainer to keep this. This thing was huge for all of our clients, people who are in the service industry and whatnot. So that 199A is pretty important.
So I want to come back to, so we've talked about taxes, and my eyes are going
I'm
cross.
not
So
done. I'm not
I know you're
done.
not done. We gotta split it out a little bit, because I'm
No,
just
no,
like,
there's a couple of big ones.
we'll get them. I promise. I
All
promise. So
right.
let's switch over now. Let's talk a little bit about labor, because that's a big deal, and then we'll come back to tax stuff. I got to take them in small portions there, Dan. Otherwise, you're gonna make me. It's just like, I love taxes. I mean, it's my
We
favorite.
did a talk at Pest World, and I had a bunch of my uh, teammates up there doing a talk, and everybody had glazed eyes until we started talking about taxes, and everybody raising their hand. Yeah, everybody's a nerd.
So let's okay. So we talked about the Farm Act. We talked about taxes at an individual level. We're starting to get into it for at the company level and in the pass through, which I think is fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about labor, because I think
Mhm.
that's going to be a big. I think that's going to be a big deal. Um, just because of, and maybe it's rhetoric, maybe he's serious, right? But ultimately, Trump has talked about really enforcing immigration. And the question we got to ask is, like, what kind of impact is that going to have on our industry? Now, I'm not saying that we're all out there hiring a bunch of illegals. I'm not inferring that. I'm not saying that. I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, there is work to be done, and there's labor to do that work. And if you cut out a percentage of that labor, or start restricting visas and those types of things, that means the overall labor pool is going to tighten. Period. Dot. I don't care what you say.
And pest
That's what's going to
control,
happen.
you're going to have. I believe that the reason that you've got low unemployment right now is just the whole gig economy. Everybody's a Uber driver and that kind of thing. But what
Mm-hmm.
I also believe is that, especially in the lawn care industry, where you get those H-2B guys coming,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where that goes, right? So if we're deporting everybody, what are we doing with the number or the quotas on the H-2Bs? Because does that mean that our lawn care clients and friends are, going to be in between a rock and a hard place, or does it get better for them? I don't know.
Well, I think at the end of the day, if it's just they focusing on illegal immigration, and they leave that program alone, I don't think there's going to be much. But I think, well, even if they are illegal, it's still going to have an impact. At the end of the day, here's what I think is going to happen. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if they don't cap the H-2B visa thing. If they restrict if there's a certain percentage of the labor pool that shrinks, it is absolutely going to increase wages. It's going
Mhm.
to happen. And so if I'm sitting back and I'm looking at all this, of course, these are all things I cannot control, but ultimately, I would expect the labor market to get tighter. I would expect it to be increased competition for frontline workers, and I would expect wages to go up. And so, if you're sitting back and you're thinking about this and you're looking at this, I would start planning on that. Maybe not in 25, but certainly in 26. So, back to your tax stuff, Dan. I had to have that PSA about labor because I think it's really
Well, just
important.
real quickly, how much does, what does it go up to? It's
It's a
kind of
great question.
interesting, when I got in the business, if you made 12 bucks an hour as a technician, that was pretty good. Now you're more than double that, right? So,
Well, remember back when we had COVID, you and I were, they're like, oh yeah, the CPI is up 6%. And we did that ourselves. And we said, no, labor's up. Remember it was like 16% for our industry. So
yeah.
I just think at the end of the day, this is something that as an owner, you really need to be thinking about, and I would expect it, and don't be surprised, especially if there's a major crackdown in illegal immigration. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not wagering an opinion of moral. I mean, I'm just talking to you from a perspective as a business owner. The fact is that labor is already tight in our industry, already
Mm,
tight. Wages
mm,
have gone up significantly since 2000 or 2020, sorry, since COVID. I don't see that changing. In
yeah.
fact, I see it getting worse. So,
Yeah.
okay. Doom and
All right,
gloom.
so back to taxes.
Yes.
The bonus depreciations, those were provisions whereby there's multiple ways that you can do it, but there's multiple ways that you can accelerate your depreciation, either through 179 or through this accelerated depreciation and whatnot. And so the bonus depreciation. Um, it has a high cost. There's a lot of abuse, but I think that it's going to, stand the test of time, and I believe that it'll stay in. So that those are the three the major business tax issues, and I know that we're all over the place, but here's one that is really really important to me. This is the most important thing that will happen because a lot of lawyers did a lot of contingency planning. What if the other side won and whatnot? But here's the thing, especially if you're thinking of selling your company within the next few years, right? So the estate tax, right? A lot of people were thinking, I've got to sell my company now because there's an exemption that allows you to exempt, giving, leaving money to your heirs. And prior to 2017, it was less than $6 million. Currently, with all the inflation adjustments, it's at $13.6 million. And if you're a married couple, it's over 20, you double that. So it's over 27 million. If the other side got in, they were touting that they would bring it down to 7 million each, right? So a lot of people were modeling, oh, should I sell my company in 24 or 25? Well, now I think that you've got time. I don't
Right.
think that that's going to be a problem. And that is huge because that's one of the ones that everybody that I know, very, very hot topic that everybody was thinking about. And so the estate taxes, to me, are some of the most important taxes that we're going to leave alone, and in fact, should give you some really clear visibility on what you should do with your company and your assets moving forward.
Okay. Are you good with tax?
I'm good with tax.
Okay. There is another thing that we need to talk about, which
Yes,
is, have you heard all the rhetoric about tariffs going on imports?
I have.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely has a high risk. It's a high risk item for our industry. And the reason is because of, the vast majority of our chemical, like, is it made in the US? Is it imported? Where's like, I guess my thing is this. It's so gray right now. It's really hard to say exactly how it's going to impact our industry. But there are some major suppliers that are not US owned.
And there are major suppliers, our friends who do Christmas lighting. That all comes from China, right?
Yeah.
You're going to
So
throw
I guess
60%
my
tariff
point
on
is,
that. And
yes. And let me just tell you, the way this is going to work, if it goes down this way, is that there's going to be some regulation that passes. We, meaning the owners and ultimately our customers, are going to feel the blowback from that because it's going to spike pricing. Because you just don't create industries in the United States in a year, right? There's going to have to be investment. And listen, I'm not opposed to doing what he's talking about doing, and the intent behind it is very good, which is to encourage, American manufacturing, to help American manufacturing, right? I mean, all of those things. I'm only making the point that I think we're going to have a period of like um, adjusting.
Well,
If that,
it's interesting, right? So if I throw this massive tariff on something that's made overseas, then what are they that's going to go on top of the price that I have to pay for it, unless I
100%.
can secure it from somebody who's here.
Hmm.
But if there's nobody manufacturing that here, which in a lot of cases is true because the labor arbitrage that you get from outsourcing overseas make it, advantageous to manufacture over there, so you don't have it here. So it will be interesting, and it potentially will cause inflation.
Here's what I will tell you though. Like, this is probably going to happen. I mean, I don't know that Trump. I mean, he hammered this very hard when he was campaigning about tariffs, and I think he's going to come through in some regard. Whether or not it's 300%, I don't know what that number is. Who knows, right? How that's all going to play out. The good thing is that even if this goes through, we're talking what, 10% of your P&L. I mean, it's nowhere near the risk as the labor is. The labor to me is a big risk for your business. And so just things to think about. Again, we don't know how this is all going to play out, but I do know that if it turns out that these tariffs are put on, it will have a big impact in our industry just because of the way that we procure our materials and where our materials are made,
So
quite
just
frankly.
to kind of explain further what you're saying, because this was one of the when fuel prices were skyrocketing, people were losing their minds. Well, if fuel is 2% of your P&L,
Right.
material is
Exactly.
7% of your P&L,
Right.
and it goes up by 50%,
Right.
it's not a big
Right.
deal.
Right.
But labor, all in, technician, sales, and office is somewhere around 45%. If that goes up by even 25%, that's 10% of your P&L. So that's why that's important.
And then there's just one final thing I want to chat about, and I mean we can go into more things if you're thinking there, Dan, but these are just the ones I want to make sure we get in front of, which is, you know, I was very surprised over and over again how much, um, and this was not just Trump. This was almost every Republican candidate I could see. Their messaging was, I want to be able to go to the grocery store and afford groceries. I want to be able to go and like, they really brought it down to just the impact of inflation and how much inflation was really, pinching the average American consumer. One of the biggest issues I see in our industry right now is the housing market. The housing market's not moving. It's moving, but nowhere near like what it was, and it's a major driver for both pest and lawn. And depending on where you're at in the country, look in the Raleigh area, we're pretty insulated. There's other areas of the market, I mean, other areas of the country where it is very significant. And the fact is that the housing market has put a massive, I mean, they've pumped the brakes quite a bit since interest rates have went up, and that's exactly what it was designed to do because it was fueling inflation. If interest rates come down, I feel like it's going to be a huge win for our industry because I think it's going to gen up a lot more business because we are dependent, like it or love it. I don't care what you say. Our growth of our industry is dependent upon the housing market. I'm not saying exclusively, but it has a big impact on the growth of our industry. When housing is going crazy, look at our industry and you're going to see that we'll fall right in line. Now, there's been things that come along like door to door, a few of the things that's grown the market despite, but still, though, we are very much still tied to the housing market, and so I'm interested to see what happens with rates and if they're able to do it and still control inflation because, there's rhetoric, there's politics, there's everyone feeling good, and then there's economic realities.
Well, I think one of the interesting things that, when you're as wealthy as you are, it doesn't really
Oh, here
matter.
we go.
But
Here we go.
but
Yeah.
if you listen to both sides, right, they were harping on the economy, how the average consumer is, kind of in trouble and whatnot. And so, you've had recessions in the past, you've had down years and whatnot. But what was totally different about this is the fact that everybody was locked into these 2 and 3% mortgages. So nobody's moving and
Yeah.
selling their house because if you want to trade up, not only are you trading up the price, but your payment is going to go way up just because of the mortgage rates. And I think that will, if interest rates come down, and I don't see them coming down to 1% or wherever they were, during COVID, if they come down, that will free up some of this, this lock that people, have and say, well, we're not selling. So that might be interesting. So it might cause the real estate market to move up,
Right.
which makes it very, very difficult for our kids because even right now they can't afford to
Yeah.
get. Like where does it start? $500,000? I mean, a kid coming out of
Right.
college, it's crazy.
It is crazy.
Um,
It is crazy. I listen, at the end of the day, I don't know if anyone's a Dave Ramsey fan. I actually like Dave Ramsey. He did a rant right after the election, and I tend to agree with him. And one of the things that he said that has really stuck with me is like, you need to worry less about what's happening in the White House and worry more about what's happening in your house. And listen, one of the points that he made, and I can certainly agree with as a small business owner, is that sometimes we put a little too much into what's happening with the president, with the administration. The fact is that, I've been under, I personally have been under, Democrat and thought the world was going to end and our business did well. I've been under Republican. I thought everything was going to be great. They're going to make all these changes and they didn't quite come through. But I mean, for both, and we did just fine. And so I guess if there's any final takeaway from me is there's obviously going to be an impact, right? But it's not going to make or break your business, right? Ultimately, what really matters is what's going on in your house and making sure that you're, doing the basics of business. At the end of the day, I love challenges. And the reason I love challenges is because they create new opportunities. And that's what business is all about, right? It's finding the opportunities, exposing them, and then, taking advantage of them. It's not sitting back and, complaining about, this is happening and this is out of my control and there's nothing I can do about it, because the fact of the matter is that in again, no matter which administration is in power, if you're doing the fundamentals of business very, very well, your business is going to grow. We are not, at least I'm aware of, not that I'm aware of, there's only about two companies, maybe three, that are in the B's. When I say the B's, I'm talking about the billions. And so the vast majority, what that means is that we're in control. And if you're doing the fundamentals really, really well, you will succeed as a business and you will grow. So
I mean, I
that
think to your point, the Fed chairman probably has more influence on the economy than the president.
correct.
But if
Correct.
you look at, everybody talks about, if the economy's no good, it's the president's fault. If the economy's good, it's the president gets the credit. But if you think of a tsunami and a guy on a surfboard on the top, that's the
Yeah.
president, no matter who it
Mhm.
is, and
Right.
that's what goes on.
That's exactly right.
But it's kind of interesting. So, what did we learn today? We learned that Triangle is one of those companies in the B's.
Oh gosh, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of something else I can say besides billion. Becoming a better company. We are in the
Yes,
B's. There you
yes,
go.
yes,
Yes.
yes. Um,
No, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, if I were to wrap this all up, I think it's a positive, no matter where you're at in business. I think there are definitely risks. And I think, the administration has got their work cut out for them. It sounds great to go and cut taxes and ship everyone out and get out of EVs and those types. All that stuff sounds great when we're all sitting around and we're having a kumbaya moment and we're holding hands. But the fact is that a lot of that stuff is pretty complex and it's going to take some time. And I think, for us, going back to how I finished it up a while ago, is, right now focus on the business fundamentals, and ultimately a lot of these things I think are going to play into our favor, especially when you look at things like the farm bill, you look at tax cuts, as well as maybe even interest rate cuts. I think it's going to be a positive overall. So Dan, parting thoughts from you?
I think you're right. I think sit back when you're doing your budgeting, look for. I think that things are going to ease up a little bit, and I think that things are. I don't want to say going to be easier, but we're going to have a better playing field in
Yeah.
terms of being able to win. So
Sure. I'm got to sneeze.
Bless you.
But yes.
Bless
So
you.
just a reminder, all the resources and topics that we talked about today are available on the podcast website, pmpindustryinsider.com. Just take a look under show notes. And we always appreciate ratings and reviews if they're positive, and complaints, just send them to Dan. And with that, we'll see you all next time. Take care now.
Take care. Bye.